So as we're scoping this initiative, we're thinking about a few different use cases where this can fit in. One of them is upskilling, identifying where employees have skills gaps in using AI effectively for their work, both as individuals or working in teams, and working through how to measure AI fluency and help them grow AI fluency, as well as the relational skills to work in teams together with AI. The second one is internal mobility. A lot of employees are thinking about how they can move within organizations. Our hope is that the work that we're doing can support the matching of employees with new roles by helping demonstrate what competencies they have, how they are evolving, and not just a set of static credentials. A third use case that is of a lot of interest to us is the notion of a workforce-wide AI readiness assessment, getting a sense of how AI ready one's workforce is with respect to solving specific problems with the help of AI. And so how do you measure that kind of readiness and how you can then grow it from there on? And then finally, this is in some ways where we started off with this initiative, but we recognize that hiring has a lot of legal constraints. We do think that there is a use case here for using some of the tooling that we build in order to optimize hiring processes, make them smoother, make them more fair. And so directly being able to measure what skills people come in with is one of the goals that we have to facilitate hiring. Now, those are sort of a range, and I want you to take away that there's sort of many places where this can fit in, many places where we could collaborate. But let me get into the specific problems that we're tackling, and I hinted at a few of them already. The very first one, the one that we started with, is this notion of skills-based hiring, which from talking to a number of HR professionals, we learned that it is very hard to implement. And it's also a very static way of doing things, right? Employers and candidates, the struggle to define what skills they have and are looking for at a level that's granular enough for this to be meaningful and effective. The evidence that's out there for skills is often too broad, right? University credentials, for instance, are not at the skill level typically. And so it's hard to align these. And then finally, these skills are, the way that they're represented is often in a very static way, whereas skills are really dynamic, right? People learn on the job. We want a way for them to be able to demonstrate that. The second problem that we're tackling is this issue of measuring AI readiness, trying to figure out what that really means and how you can cultivate that, right? How do you promote people learning how to be more AI ready? There's very little research-backed methods on this. There's a few surveys, but how well they correlate with actual work is unclear. There's some behavioral measures of AI fluency, but they're still somewhat unreliable to use them in a scalable manner. And then finally, there's just no effective ways that we know of right now for developing AI fluency in a scalable fashion. The final problem that we're tackling, it may seem somewhat different, but it's actually quite related. And a lot of you probably recognize how important relational skills are at a time when AI is sort of trying to take up a lot of the cognitive work and knowledge work. You have to still present the results that you create when working with AI. You have to still work in teams effectively. Relational skills are in some ways more important than ever now that we have sort of robots to help us with some other tasks. And so how do we measure interpersonal and teamwork skills is really critical. Interviewing is a potentially effective way of doing that, but it's very time intensive and costly. And some of the methods for interviewing can be inaccurate and prone to bias. And so that is another problem that our initiative is aiming to tackle. So let me tell you a little bit about how we think about these problems and the competencies that we focus on in this work. And there's three of them, and I'll go through them one by one. The very first one is AI fluency. So AI fluency is the idea that you can use AI tools and collaborate with them, both individually, trying to solve a problem, work on a task, but also across teams, where an entire team is working together and bringing in AI to help them accomplish their goals. We are building here on a framework that was developed by Rick Dakin and Joseph Feller, which has also been used by Anthropic, which is called the 4D framework, the 4 dimensions of AI fluency. We think this does a good job in representing the different ways of using AI responsibly and breaking down the problem a little bit and making the separate components more measurable, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So delegation is the first component here, which is all about deciding when and how to use AI effectively in a workflow, right? You want to understand the capabilities of AI, but also its limitations, and make really informed choices about whether and when to automate a specific task. Second dimension is description. Some of you might know this as prompting and prompt engineering, but there's a little bit more to it. It's all about describing what it is that you are aiming for, what is your vision, and then tasking the AI very clearly to achieve that, being really clear about what does success look like in this task. So you want to be able to see that people can craft clear, specific, well-structured prompts to guide the AI tools to produce the right outputs. The third dimension is discernment. And this is all about critically evaluating the outputs of an AI, not just taking them at face value, questioning the AI, realizing that you can ask the AI to check itself, to be its own critic, flagging when the model is missing something important. And then finally is diligence, right? Which is about taking responsibility for the work that was produced, working with AI, maintaining ethics and the transparency of how AI was used, disclosing when it was used and how it was used in ways that are helpful, verifying the output, and really making sure that the final judgments are still owned by humans, right? The mistakes are finally up to the people who are using the AI. So that's diligence. So this is the 4D framework. There's a recent report from Anthropic that tried to apply this framework to a data set that they had from users of Claude. And what they found is that some of the indicators of these 4D dimensions can be identified in chats, but many of them could not be. So there's 24 indicators of behaviors of doing these different processes. And they were able to identify 11 of those indicators. Things like people setting goals, providing examples, the tone that they used, how they iterated and refined their prompts, and flagging when the model might have missed something. But there's a lot of things that Anthropic in the report acknowledged could not be observed in the chats alone. And some of them are actually really important pieces around diligence and discernment. Verifying that the AI output is accurate by comparing it to source data, disclosing AI use, making sure the final judgment is human-owned, choosing when not to use AI for a specific task. So a lot of things cannot be captured in just chats alone. And so we hope that our simulation-based approach that I'll talk more about in just a second is able to capture all of the 4Ds, is able to give you a holistic picture of AI fluency. All right, with that said, I'll move on to the second pillar of our work, which is the notion of adaptive flexibility, which is all about how quickly people pick up new skills, integrate feedback that they receive, and adapt to evolving roles. It was really important to our team that there is a strong emphasis on learning, on growth, on development, right? Our goal is not just to label people with how fluent they are, it's to make sure that we give them the resources to learn, to grow, to do better, and to demonstrate that they are able to learn quickly and pick up new skills, which is so important in today's workforce. And so we draw here on literature and evidence from a few different places. One is work on learning agility, learning quickly from experiences, being able to apply them in new situations and tasks, but also work on cognitive flexibility, being able to update one's mental model of how things are working, revisiting assumptions that might be held as you approach a problem with new workflows. And then also just being an efficient learner, carrying lessons across different tasks, figuring out how one problem is similar to another and trying methods that were learned for them. Now, the third pillar of our initiative is relational fluency. As I mentioned, working in teams is critical. Being able to take other people's perspectives, engage in emotional regulation, apology and repair, creating teams that are psychologically safe, are all known to be really important factors in the workplace. And so we are, building on some of the work in this literature to evaluate if candidates are able to engage in these behaviors effectively. And I'm showing a few examples here on the slide. So those are the three main pillars that we're working on as we're developing simulations. Our approach is case-based and simulation-based. We know from the HR literature that case-based hiring is one of the most effective ways to hire, because you can see people do the work that is related to the kind of work they would be doing. But creating cases is very time-consuming. Going through cases is very time-consuming. Simulations are really effective ways to give people a chance to demonstrate how they can do something. And so the approach here is going from tell me more about a time when you did this to demonstrate how you work in a realistic scenario. And so we use AI in order to scale up case-based work demonstrations so that candidates can complete tasks that are AI generated that mirror job demands. And hopefully that will reveal then how they actually work and think. To make that somewhat more scalable, we use what we call work patterns as templates. So these cases are organized based on a pattern of what kinds of tasks someone goes through as they're completing a work product. I'll show you the main work pattern that we've identified so far, and we're really interested in learning about other ones that we could build on. And so this helps us make reusable, time-constrained work patterns that we can give out as realistic simulations. And finally, and very importantly, we don't just want to simulate the work, we want to measure how a candidate works in that environment, right? What actions they take, how they're going about solving a problem, right? And this is where we go beyond just looking at the chat that an LLM company might have access to, and looking at the overall work environment that we're simulating to be able to capture more context. So here comes the exciting part, which is the demonstration. And so the work pattern that we're going to be looking at is the following. We want somebody to plan. This will be a task where you have some files. I'll show you the task in a second. You have some files. You have to plan how to analyze them and write a report for leadership. You need to prepare how you want to go about answering the questions. You need to implement by using the files, using the right tools in order to analyze them. You might need to iterate to figure out how to best present the answers. And then you need to deliver the report that you have to leadership. And then we will capture evidence of how somebody goes through all of these steps and map them to our 4Ds: delegation, discernment, description, and diligence, as well as evaluate the output quality of the final deliverable. So that's sort of the general workflow for measuring AI fluency. What we'll also do in the video that I'll show you in just a second is do it again. We'll go through that first process here at the top: plan, prepare, implement, iterate, deliver. We'll give some feedback to the candidate, and that feedback allows them to improve. We'll tell them, hey, this was very good, nice job on this, but here are some concrete things based on what we've observed, how you solved that task for each of these categories that you could do better. And then they have the option of trying again, and they'll get an isomorphic problem, something that's similar, but not exactly the same, where they can go through it again and demonstrate that they have learned from the feedback. And that is how we measure adaptive flexibility. So with that said, that's sort of what's going to be happening in the video that I'll show you, and I'll narrate what's going on in the video. This is in the actual tool that we've built. So here you start off, you get the task, right? It says from the beginning, the assignment is designed to measure your AI fluency. You have this task here where you're asked to complete the survey insight analysis task in 60 minutes. You get this context about an international manufacturer of keyboards. You are asked to analyze the customer survey data and product experience data and report out your insights. You're supposed to conclude with some suggested next steps for QA, marketing, product, and customer support teams. And the case files include 2 survey response CSVs and some survey questionnaire, codebook, open comments, support tickets, marketing notes. So it's a pretty substantial task to complete in 60 minutes, right? We haven't actually validated that 60 minutes is the exact right amount of time. And you'll see in the interface just in a second how that is all laid out. We give the candidate some instructions on how to use the AI assistant, which is just like ChatGPT or Claude, which they are allowed to use as much as they like, and which is aware of the task and the files. They're free to use this agent, and we'll give them feedback. And then importantly, we tell them a little bit about how how AI fluency is defined here, right? And that we give them feedback on delegation, how description, discernment, and diligence, so they have a context of what matters here. We give them a note also that they should be working in the simulated environment and not sort of asking ChatGPT outside, because that is the environment in which we give them feedback on. We can track if they go outside and copy paste something in, so there's sort of a light warning that, please stay in this environment. Okay, so this is the instructions. People click the I'm ready to start. You have a little guided tour here. You see the task brief again. We already went through that. Then the guided tour continues. You see that there's this workbench where you have materials, a place to query, a place to analyze and write your responses. And then we start. You see the time ticking at the top. The AI assistant lets the candidate know that they have context. And here you see the first use of AI, which is deliberately chosen to not be so AI fluent, where the candidate is just asking, please solve this task for me. Here's my task, go. And the AI will, of course, give an answer. So now the candidate is asking give me some code here to do this. How can I accomplish this? They go to the SQL tab where they copy paste the code from the AI, let it run, they get a result. And then they ask for some more code to do an analysis based on what they found. So this is sped up a little bit. They go to the analysis tab, these tabs, this is a setup for one specific task, but this is, configurable to different kinds of tasks, of course, depending on what kind of role we're looking for AI fluency in. And so here you go, you see that the candidate is just asking for some recommendations that they can put in the report based on not very much interaction with the files. All right, so you see it's someone here who's very much over-relying on AI to hopefully make the right decisions and give the right suggestions. And then is asking for just a draft of a leadership memo with all the suggestions. And so you'll see that it, of course, will comply with that ask. And then here's the right response. Here's where the candidate can put in their answer, which could be different formats, doesn't have to be text, right? It could be a slide deck, could be other things. But here you can see that the candidate's just sort of copy pasting from the AI system, what the AI system has given them. All right, and then they submit. So they finish the task well under time. And so the AI now goes over everything to generate feedback. And so here you see the feedback that was generated after this first attempt on AI fluency for each of these dimensions. So for delegation, choosing what to ask the AI, they can score a 1 out of 5 in this case. They get some positive feedback. You used AI to support some of the tasks. But there are some specific ways to improve, which are based on the observed behaviors, right? Be more strategic about when you ask AI to do something. Um, use your judgment about what matters most. Don't just take the first recommendation, which is what happened. Break complex requests into smaller steps. There's a lot of sort of give me everything requests rather than sort of really trying to dissect what is necessary. And using AI not only to draft text, but also to challenge the interpretation, right? At no point did the candidate say like, okay, what is wrong here? What is missing? What is there anything else that I should be considering here, right? Which are often very helpful ways of getting more out of an AI tool. Similarly, I won't go through all of them, but for description and discernment and diligence, you see the same pattern. Here's what you've done well. Here's some concrete things you could do next time to do better. The adaptive flexibility score is unavailable because we've only seen one attempt so far. So there's an encouragement to do again. And then there's a little bit of feedback on the final output, that report that was given. And so here the candidate decides after reading the feedback to try again. So they go back, they get a slightly different case, slightly different data that was generated in this case. So it's not just a simple repeat. And here you see them already behaving differently, right? They're going through the survey files, they're looking at what the data sets look like, trying to understand what data is available that might be useful here in order to shape this report. Right, they're asking for a strategy. And so they're now prompting in a much more deliberate way, realizing that there are some potential issues in the data set. Being clear about what might be missing, what's wrong, and trying to overcome these issues, right? With survey data, you often have duplicated responses, you might have missing data, all decisions where how you handle them is really important and can affect the outcomes. And so you see here a more deliberate approach. So I'll speed, oops, oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to speed that up, but that did not work as expected. All right, and so here you see how they handle the final report. Right, they got help again from AI to write the final report. Actually, they wrote the report themselves in this case. They asked for some polishing advice, grammar checks, logic checks, asking for more suggestions of how to make this better. And then finally, they submit the final report. All right, so now we've got the scoring again happening, looking at all the interactions and how the candidate used the AI or didn't use it. And so here you see an updated feedback report based on the better AI fluency that was exhibited here. You see better scores. You see more what went well, giving praise for what worked well, making sure that is recognized. Also being very clear on how it differs from the first attempt, right? You did this better than last time. But still giving some feedback on how the candidate could further advance their AI fluency by going one step further, asking for outputs in evidence tracking formats where you can see sort of see what table this claim is based in, looking for potential counter evidence or alternative interpretations, before submitting, making sure that everything matches the data that is shown. And so on and so forth. And for adaptive flexibility, now we're able to observe a change. The candidate, increased their AI fluency very significantly in this example here. And so they see that they went from accepting an early recommendation to being much more careful in how they're taking the AI recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. But there's still some ways to improve the workflow going forward. So this is what it looks like to the candidate. On the employer side, just a brief look of what somebody on the back end might see, which is already built into the tool, is sort of an employer report where they observe, how well somebody did the first time, how well they did the second time, the change, and sort of an overview of of what happened, as well as tracking if a candidates have used other outside tools in trying to essentially cheat in the process. So this is something that we're still building out, and we'd love feedback on what would be helpful to see here. Great. So that is the first part of the demonstration, which is all about measuring AI fluency and adaptive flexibility. And I want to show you the final part of the demonstration, which is about relational fluency. And so one of the things you might imagine is rather than this simulation ending in the final report that's written up, having the candidate give a presentation of the final report, prepare a slide deck that they present to the team, where they have to voice over the results and explain, and maybe get some questions from the team about the results. And so this is the second part that we've built here, and Kizilcec Lee has sort of taken the lead on building the AI, the simulation platform, where you can have conversations either one-on-one with an AI, or have multiple AIs and you as the one human in the room, where you're trying to facilitate group meetings or facilitate conversations. So for instance, here in the demonstration that I'll show you, we have a group meeting scenario where you have just presented the results from the previous demonstration, right? You've given your report to the team, and then we'll see a conversation in the team. Now, we're taking an approach here of simulating real scenarios rather than just AI-based interviewing, which is becoming popular these days, where you essentially take behavioral interviewing question, tell me about a time when you did, you sort of resolved a team conflict, which can be done with AI as well, but may not be as good as really putting somebody in the situation where they have to resolve a conflict. And so we've got some initial evidence from a pilot study that we ran here with 100 students across 70 teams. These students were working together for the whole semester with each other, and so they had a pretty good sense of how good of a communicator different students were on the team. And we gave them a 5 to 7 minute long AI simulation, completely independent from their classwork, to see if that short AI simulation could predict what their classmates were saying about that same individual for this whole semester after working with them. We compared the behavioral interview style AI simulation, one-on-one, to the simulated negotiation style scenario, and found that, in fact, the simulation style scenario had more predictive power of how good of a communicator the student was, right? So this is some initial evidence that suggests that simulating scenarios may be more effective in measuring these skills, these interpersonal skills, than just using behavioral interview questions. All right, with that said, here's the situation. You come in that scenario, you get the sort of this image of the room where you've just presented. You get the scenario, and you're asked to help mediate it. So here's what this may look like.
Right. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Really solid work. I think this gives us exactly what we needed. What does everyone else think?
Oh, come on. Exactly what we needed. Based on what? A survey that half the team probably didn't even bother filling out?
The response rate was in the slides, Arjun. Did you miss that part?
Arjun, our response rate is more than 60%.
60% means 40% of the team is just absent from your conclusions, but sure, call that solid.
That's a pretty standard response rate for this kind of survey, and you know it.
Do you even know what non-response bias is? Or are we just going to take Claire's word for it that 60% is fine?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that everyone here in the room feels respected and heard. I'm happy to answer questions that everyone feels okay with the findings.
Fair enough. So walk me through how you checked whether the people who didn't respond are systematically different from the ones who did.
That's a fair question, and I'm glad they're answering it. But let's drop the do you even know stuff, Arjun. That was out of line.
All right. So this is an example of what that kind of simulation may look like. Of course, all of this is very tailorable. Uh, Thank you, Jinsuk, for being brave enough to sort of put that out there as an example of sort of trying to manage the room when sometimes conflict arises, and you have to sort of keep everybody together and manage these situations. And so, the prompt I gave Jinsuk for creating this was like, I make sure that people in the audience sort of feel how uncomfortable it can be to be in this simulation and how it's difficult, even though it's not real, they're all AIs. But because you see the faces, even though they're not moving, and somebody sort of attacks somebody else, it just sort of gets this visceral response in us, right? And that is really important here in order to practice. After this kind of simulation, we would be seeing feedback, just like in the other one. Here's just an example of what that feedback might look like, what the candidate did well on, how they could improve. Again, trying to be very concrete and grounded in what happened in the scenario. And after the feedback, just like in the previous one, there's an opportunity to try again, right? If this teaches you a good de-escalation strategy, or you want to sort of try again because in the moment you couldn't find the right words, you can go back and give it another shot in a somewhat similar scenario. One thing I want to stress is sort of right now, as we're sort of building up and trying to build partnerships, there wouldn't be any cost involved in working together. We are happy to keep names of organizations anonymous because sometimes I understand sort of working with, being a leader, trying to try out new AI solutions can be a little risky. So we're happy to keep names anonymous. And what's really important is that we want you to shape what we build, right? We don't want to build some AI-ready workforce initiative in a vacuum. That is why we have this first employer showcase today. And so some ways that we think about collaborating are co-designing AI fluency and relational fluency tasks. We just showed you two examples that we made up based on some of the interests that we've heard before, but clearly there's many other types of roles, situations, scenarios, and we would love to work together to understand what tasks are really important to your organization and how we could work together to generate some simulations to try out. Speaking of trying out, the second thing we'd be really interested in is doing some pilots together, collaborating to test 1 or 2 or 3 of these simulations with some of your employees to see how informative they find it, the feedback, how to make the feedback most helpful, and see how much your employees are learning from the feedback as they're taking it again. And then finally, our hope is that we can establish some real assessment signal here for outcomes, that doing well on this task does in fact correlate with on-the-job performance in different places, and making sure that what we're training here, what we're measuring here is really predictive of what matters to employers and team outcomes.